Hello, biology students. This is Mr. Russell. If I look spectacularly tan to you, that's because I just got back from Hawaii a few days ago. Deal with it. All right, so spring semester, let's go. Our first objective we're going to cover, that's objective 7, and that is protein synthesis. To synthesize something means to make it, and a protein is something that your cells make. It's very, very important. We're going to talk about that, how your cells make proteins. So let's talk about what proteins are. First of all, they are numerous and complex biomolecules. Remember, a biomolecule is a molecule or a big particle of some sort that, well, in this case, because it's bio, that means it's produced by a living thing. Biology, living things. So biomolecules are produced by living things. Okay, and proteins are very big, complex biomolecules, and your cells and the cells of all living things, so cockroaches, palm trees, whatever, they make tons and tons of different proteins, and they all have different functions. For example, your cells are capable of making about 100,000 different proteins, okay? And you've heard me refer to my cookbook example, where I talk about how your DNA is like a cookbook, and it's full of recipes, all right? Well, in this case, each one of the recipes in your DNA, instead of making a delicious dish of some sort, it makes a specific protein that has a specific function. Okay? And you can make about 100,000 of them, and this just gives you a tiny little idea of just how complex your cells are. You really are capable of doing just an enormous amount of stuff, and you're not just capable, you have to, or else you wouldn't survive. So if you ask the question, what does a protein do, that's really kind of hard to answer because proteins do everything. The reason you have 100,000 different ones in your body is because you have, about 100,000 different functions that have to be carried out, things that have to be made or broken down or changed or moved from one place to another. Lots and lots of different things, and I'll talk more about those functions on the next page. But yeah, you can make about 100,000 of them. And what do proteins do? They do everything in your body. Anything that needs to be done, a protein does it, which is not a good definition, but that's the best I got. Okay, here's a picture of one, and this is really kind of a complex one. I forgot what I put on here. I'm pretty sure this is insulin, human insulin. And the reason it's got different colors is because it's actually made out of different chains of amino acids. We'll talk about the structure here in a couple slides. So this is one protein, and this seems totally random and looks like a big mess, but this is actually really, really specific. If it's not exactly this shape, it's not going to function properly, and that's going to be bad news bears for you. All right, so just some examples of things that proteins do. They help fight infection. You may have heard of antibodies. These are little weapons that your immune system produces so that when a pathogen invades, your cells will specifically make a little protein weapon called an antibody that is specifically designed to attack influenza or anthrax or the cold or anything. This is actually what vaccinations are. They're not antibodies, but it's a way of tricking your cells into making antibodies against the disease that you don't have. They are lots of structural components. Collagen is what makes your skin stretchy. Sometimes when people get old, they don't produce as much collagen as they used to, and their skin starts to sick because they don't have as much collagen. Okay, cartilage is another one that's kind of similar to that. It's flexible, and that's what's in your ears and the tip of your nose, not the bridge. This part's bone, and that's why it can be broken. But this is cartilage. You also have it in most of your joints. It helps lubricate them so things move correctly. Okay, keratin is what your fingernails and your hair is made out of. A rhinoceros horn is also made out of keratin. Actin and myosin are extremely important. They are two different proteins in your muscle fibers, and they grab onto one another, and that's how your muscles contract, by these proteins grabbing onto one another and pulling. Okay, they are important parts of cell membranes. Marker proteins tell cells that other cells are in the area. Your cells actually have to be able to communicate with one another for a lot of different reasons so that they can function properly. Channel proteins are something we've talked about, basically a little doorway through a cell membrane. Also, we talked about like active transport, sodium potassium pumps. Those are channel proteins. Okay, transport. And this is not talking about moving things in or out of a cell, but moving things around your body. Hemoglobin is a great example. Not to be confused with hobgoblin, that's different. Hemoglobin actually carries the vast majority of oxygen in your blood. You could not survive without this stuff, because remember, you need a lot of oxygen so you can do a lot of aerobic respiration. Well, hemoglobin is what actually makes your red blood cells red when they come into contact with oxygen, and it carries oxygen. Okay, hormones, which you're all well aware of because you are adolescents, and of course everybody tells you all the time that your hormones are raging. Okay, some hormones are proteins. And here's a couple examples of those. Insulin, I showed you a picture of that a little while ago. That is a protein that actually tells your cells when they need to absorb glucose from the bloodstream to use for cellular respiration. Okay, and people who are diabetic, they either don't make enough insulin or they don't make any of it, at least type 1 diabetes. Type 2 is a little bit different. HGH you may have heard of. That stands for human growth hormone. Okay, and HGH is something that happens naturally in humans. That's what makes us grow. So when you're born and you start growing like a weed, and then maybe you slow down a little bit at 9 or 10, and then you started shooting up again in a couple of years, okay, that happens because of the release of human growth hormone. It tells your bones to get longer. Sorry, I'm having a little trouble with the screen here. To get longer. Some athletes also take this stuff because it helps them recuperate from injuries and also put on muscle faster. Okay, so that's human growth hormone, or HGH. I had a cool link here to go to a page about some of the world's deadliest known proteins, and there are all various venoms and toxins that either a bacteria produces, or a snake, or an insect, or something like that, or sometimes plants. But a lot of those venomous toxins, they are proteins that, instead of doing something helpful, they do something terrible when they get inside of your body. Okay, this is just a silly little picture that has girls with fake lips, because collagen is something that they inject into people's lips sometimes to make them appear fuller. These ones are not real. Okay, so let's talk about protein structure. All right, proteins are long chains, right? Kind of like DNA. It's a long chain made out of a whole bunch of links. Okay, and they are long chains of building blocks, or smaller pieces, also called subunits. Building blocks called amino acids. Okay, and that's what you make them out of. We have 20 on here. Sometimes you'll hear 21 amino acids. I believe in the health classes they go by 20. We always use 21 just because that's what myself and Mr. Wright and Mr. Scott have always been told. That's the way we learn. So the actual number is not super important for our purposes. But yeah, that's what they're made out of. And so you can kind of think of it as like as a box of Legos. It's got 20 different kinds of Legos in it, and you can just make an infinite number of things out of those Legos. Okay, they are held together into this chain by special bonds called peptide bonds. Peptide is an old-fashioned term for amino acids, and then sometimes you'll see proteins referred to as polypeptides, meaning many peptides or many amino acids. But the bonds that hold them together are peptide bonds. Okay, this is a picture of it. Each of these green pieces is a peptide bond, and this thing in between, we're not going to get too far into their chemical structure. Each one of those is an amino acid. So you put a bunch of them together, and you end up with a protein. Okay, so where do proteins get their function from? Why is it that some of them carry oxygen, like hemoglobin, and then some of them tell your cells to take glucose in from the bloodstream, like insulin? Well, they get that function from their shape. It's kind of like a key, all right? A key gets its function from its shape. Hold on, I have an example. Booyah, all right? Each one of these keys, while they are similar, is a little different. It opens up something slightly different. And they do that because they have slightly different shapes to them, okay? That shape comes from the way that they fold up, right? So it starts out as a long chain of amino acids. Think of like a string of pearls, okay? And then that folds up into a very specific shape, okay? So this folding is determined by the order of the amino acids. So that determines the way they fold up, and it determines their shape. So really the important thing here about making proteins is what order do we put the amino acids in. It's kind of the same way as DNA, and it's also the same way as this crazy English language that you see written here. If I took these letters and put them into a slightly different order, we would get something totally different. Okay, So that's their structure. And this is a little extra detail. Some amino acids will stick together like magnets. Some repel. Some don't care what the other ones around them are doing. Because of that, some stick together. And this is why that when you put them in a certain order, you get a very specific shape. Okay, and this is a little diagram that shows you more about that. Here's our amino acid chain. When things start sticking together, you end up with, you can have various different sheets, alpha helix or a beta pleated sheet. It's a little more detailed than we need, but what I want you to get is that the order of these amino acids, the order that they fall in, determines the way this all folds up into this really complex shape. Okay, and that's really what protein synthesis is building proteins out of amino acids. Okay, here's another picture that kind of shows you the same thing. You'll see here we have individual little circles here. These are amino acids, or they represent amino acids. And then you'll see as we move down here, it starts getting more complex because they start sticking together. Some of them do, anyway. Okay, here's a little table that shows you all the amino acids and how their chemical structure is similar in some ways, but also different. And you can see that some of them have charges, some don't have charges, some are polar, some are non-polar. Okay, last thing here for the video is this little picture of human insulin. You'll see it's made out of two different amino acid chains, the purple and the blue. Mr. Scott, if you're watching this, I apologize because you won't be able to tell between the two of these things. So anyway, we have two sequences of amino acids, and they fold up in a certain way based on the order that these little circles fall in. If these were in a different order, they would not fold up the same way, and the protein would not have the same function. So remember, they get their function from their shape, and then that shape comes from the order of the amino acids because that causes them to fold up in a specific way. So thank you for watching, and tune in next time. We'll talk about enzymes.